Okay, good morning. Good morning and good afternoon. Good morning to those in the West Florida area, and good afternoon to those in the Eastern time zone. Welcome to the FCA webinar series highlighting and sharing examples of civic excellence in Florida communities. Next slide. And so Florida has a civic challenge. Some would call it a civic problem. We're the third largest state in population, but rank among the lowest states in terms of engaging in civic practices. Things like volunteering and donating to charity, helping neighbors fix a community problem, all rank very low on among the 50 states. And the often in terms of efforts, these data suggest that we have a challenge for Florida in particular. Next slide. So the Florida Civic Advance is committed to turning around these measures and has a long view of what it's going to take to get that done. We're a new nonprofit committed to working together across the different sectors, the public sector, private sector, nonprofit, philanthropic, education sectors, to work together to increase civic practices and showcase and replicate new and promising examples of civic excellence. Civicon was a 2019 Florida Civic Advance Civic Excellence Award winner, and so we are very pleased to have with us a panel that is going to kind of tell the story about Civicon, and we encourage you to listen and pose questions in the comment box on your YouTube Live platform. So one such example is the subject of today's program, Civicon in Pensacola. We have both the founders and the leaders of Civicon joining us today. And I will begin to provide a brief summary of the three individuals that we have on the broadcast today. So next slide. So let's start. Lisa Nelson Savage is the executive editor of the Pensacola News Journal since 2014, and she's a co-founder of Civicon. And her paper serves the Escambia and Santa Rosa communities. It's a Gannett publication, and she has previously served as editor with papers in Indiana and Wisconsin. And she will speak more if you have more information you'd like from her experience and background. Will Dunaway is the chair of the Civicon board of directors and one of the co-founders. He is a land use and environmental and real estate attorney and shareholder at Clark Partington in Pensacola. He practices both in Florida and Mississippi. He has served in the past as a military judge, and he is an active volunteer in Rotary and an advocate for people experiencing homelessness through a nonprofit Satasha Forest Homeless Campground Project in Escambia County. Terry Horn, he retired in 2019 after a 40-year distinguished career and in journalism, working at senior levels for USA Today on the West Coast, president publisher of Gannett Statesman Journal in Salem, Oregon, the capital of that state, and president and publisher of the Pensacola News Journal before. And he's served with papers in Arizona and California. And for Reuters, he served in papers in Kansas, West Virginia, Maryland. He was persuaded by Quint Studer to become the executive director upon his retirement in 2019. So, Terry, why don't you start us off with the background on the Civicon? So,
Bob, I think they took Terry out. I'm Will. So with that first slide, yeah, the Civicon actually began early on in 2018, kind of as a grassroots project. We were looking at, principally Quint Studer was looking at our community and our community engagement, and we found it to be somewhat lacking. So initially, we decided that what we needed to do was to educate the public on projects, both those projects, and also just a general education in civics. So I'm going to let Terry keep going and pick up on slide 2, Terry.
All righty. So the Civicon is a partnership, and we start every event with this conversation. It's a partnership between the Pensacola News Journal and the Studer Community Institute. Studer Community Institute's a nonprofit that Quint Studer started. He's one of the board members and one of the founders, and certainly a central force in all the great things going on in Civicon these days. I mean, in Pensacola these days. But the goal is to make the community a better place, through public dialogue, civic conversation, and we think that we've been making inroads there. I think if you look at the last 5 years, a lot of great things have happened in the community. Next slide. Okay, so before we jump into how Civicon was founded, because I wasn't there, I came a year and a half later. Will and Lisa will talk about that. I just wanted to share our vision and mission. We created, right after I arrived, we got a planner to create a 3-year plan and a strategic plan. And so just wanted to share our vision statement and mission statement, but really, we're really just driving, hopefully, dialogue and what we call raising the civic IQ. We bring in experts to share best practices with the community, what's going on around the world, around the country. We've had speakers from Europe, Canada, and leaders in all kinds of different areas. And it's really to help us understand maybe a different view of our community opportunities, as opposed to just knowing what we know. We want everybody to learn a lot of different things that might let us come to a different conclusion to make our community better. And so next slide.
So here gets to the issue of the origin. And again, like I said, we were looking around and Quint was looking around and realizing that some of the projects that that were getting proposed in the local area, there just wasn't a lot of engagement. There would be public meetings and nobody really would show up at these public meetings. And then all of a sudden there might be, some sign that went up that said, coming soon, and people would go, whoa, we don't know anything about it. And it was just an attempt to say, well, listen, here's how this process works. And the initial discussion was to start trying to, as Terry said, raise the civic IQ. The idea is Civicon is civic conversations, but you have to have a basic knowledge of what you're talking about. And so that's what the first year was about, to try to bring in experts who could talk to us about what does good look like? What is a good project? How do you get a good project launched? And the key to that education, in my mind, is the Pensacola News Journal and their reporting on this.
Yeah, well, I think it's important that we add that our goal was to that the word education that you just used was to provide the education. It wasn't to say, do this project, don't do this project. It was simply to say, these are the best practices in areas that our community is experiencing, to bring in people from across the world who have gone through it and who have seen success, so that they could offer a wide range of ideas that our community could choose to follow or not. In the very beginning, we really looked at it as a way to provide that type of education and training that, back in the day we would send our elected officials. They would be going to planning, smart growth conferences. And as years went on, that type of travel and funding is very hard to come by. So through us with the newspaper, we said, what a great opportunity, because we also, struggle with that same amount of travel. What if we brought the experts here? And the original hope was that we would have a lot of, elected officials and city staff, county staff, department heads, that they would look at this as an opportunity to get some of the best training that was out there. I think it's fair to say we were disappointed that we had less.
A work in progress.
Yes, not as much of that elected, not as much. That doesn't mean there's none by any means, but it certainly wasn't to the degree that we wanted. But our surprise was that the community just dug in and they loved it. And our first, for a couple of years we did them in person. We live streamed these events until COVID, and then we had to go back to just live stream it for a while. And we were filling this auditorium with.
That's exactly right. I mean, the first time, to really be honest and upfront about this, Lisa and I would have some conversations sometimes, and we'd go, "Oh my gosh, a Monday night, and we're going to bring in an expert on parking. How boring can we actually be? Who is going to show up?" And then all of a sudden, Donald Shoup showed up, and he literally wrote the book on parking, and we filled an auditorium. I mean, we filled the Rex Theater with live people. I mean, people who were present physically, and also then the live streams were hitting, 8,000 and 9,000. And we said, man, we really tapped into something here. There really is a desire to be better informed. And I think that for me personally, that was the biggest surprise of those early engagements. Chuck Marohn was our first speaker, Chuck Marohn of Smart Towns. And he was talking to us about something that really resonated. And I think that, like Lisa said, that's education was always our goal. And we were frustrated as a community because we would have, big visions and big plans and big events that didn't happen, right? And so there would be big studies, and those studies would end up on a shelf. And Chuck Marohn came in and said, start with one corner, right? Start at one intersection. Don't try to replan your entire town. Start with one intersection. Every city has one great intersection. Figure out where yours is and focus on it. Infill. Take those little bitty infill lots. You already have a street there. You already have the infrastructure. Put something on it. Donald Shoup told us, for God's sake, quit tearing down buildings and building more parking lots. Parking will find a place to park. It's the interest that draws them to the area. Those are the kinds of things that early on were real surprising. And that feedback loop with the News Journal, we would schedule a speaker. The News Journal, through Kevin Robinson, the reporter who covered Civicon and is now a board member, would introduce that speaker and that speaker's expertise. And so through that speaker and through those articles, we would give a preview, and then we would have the speaker event, and we would always follow that evening speaker event with a focused morning chat, which would be a smaller, more intimate. The original purpose was always to provide that opportunity for those experts in that area. So when we brought in, say, for instance, a Donald Shoup, a parking expert, we were inviting the planning departments of the county and the cities in the area to come and focus and ask specific questions. So that was always kind of our pattern: a big live event that was preceded by a News Journal article, a smaller, intimate educational section targeted to a group, and then we would follow up with Q&A.
And I think, Will, one of the most rewarding things that happened out of this was that we saw regular citizens, community members that weren't in the planning department or that just, lived in a house in that community, understand that they had a right to be part of that conversation. So it's very intimidating to go to a city council meeting and to speak, and very few people realize they have that right. Well, part of what Civicon, the movement was getting involved. So we see more people at those types of meetings. We see our city council actually holding public information sessions that they might not have had in the past. So we're proposing a big project. Let's bring the community in to look at it before it's too late. So that, to me, that was that real civic, engagement, that they were interacting and helping create the community that they want to live in.
No, I think that's exactly right. And I think that the illustration of that is when, and as Bob introduced me, I am a land use attorney. And so I'm often at these planning board meetings on behalf of clients, or before the Board of County Commissioners, or before the city council, on working on projects, and very sometimes, citizens would be there. But after a couple of our Civicon events, I started noticing citizens using terms that we know had been education terms from Civicon speakers. So, for instance, one speaker talked about a project and said, "We really thought that that project ought to be accompanied by a road diet." We're like, whoa, that is a specific issue. That was one of the speakers talked about, how streets ought to be made for people instead of for cars to make a downtown great, because the whole point of a downtown is for people, and pedestrians ought to have right away, and not just speeding cars back and forth trying to get from one spot to another. And so all of a sudden, that language, we call it the language of Civicon. It's really not our language. It's the language of good urban planning in that first year. But all of a sudden, those terms like street diets, terms like doing the math, citizens would talk about, well, to the city council, well, have you done the math on this? Is this project really going to contribute in a positive way? Joe Minicozy was one of our speakers who talked to us about doing that. And that was what was good about seeing success and how people were engaging.
If we go to the next slide, maybe you could talk a little bit about the makeup of the board and how we do our board meetings.
Right. So again, the first year, again, it was just a group of volunteers who were around the conference table at Quinn Studer's office. I recall very clearly that we were at a fundraising event. I'm, again, a land use attorney. I had heard that Quint was getting together a group to talk, to educate about urban planning. And I just went up to him. I said, Mr. Studer, I want in. And he goes, meeting this afternoon at 3:30. And every Monday at 3:30 since, and that was 5 years ago, this group has met either in person or virtually. And that kind of started our group. And again, it was just a group of volunteers. And then for the first year before we hired, before Terry was hired, we just did it. Well, we still do it volunteer, but we just got together, had different topics, looked for different experts. We had a great early board member, Christian Wagley, who had a lot of good contacts in the Urban Land Institute, and gave us some real good contacts with some of those early ones. And then, quite frankly, as Terry said, we had a 3-year kind of strategic plan, and we just don't seem to be able to quit. It's
Well,
still going.
I thought maybe we'd show the video of Christian Wagley, who was one of the original people that he found most of the speakers that first year, along with Jared Moore. Jared's a city council person who says he ran for city council after going to Civicon events, got inspired that the community could be better. So maybe we could play that video.
Well, Civicon has really been this amazing opportunity, I think, to bring the best and the brightest in from around the nation to talk about what I see as one of the greatest changes that's ever gone on in our country, and that is that we're designing communities again for people. So I think with Civicon, our community has really benefited from hearing from the best and the brightest on a whole range of issues that our community is facing. And I think in the age of everything being online and electronic, this kind of somewhat old-fashioned way of coming together in a venue in the same place has been amazing, where you hear from someone firsthand directly before you. You get to talk to that speaker right afterwards, and they'll stand there as long as it takes and answer your questions. And then even beyond that, to engage with the other members of the audience. Afterwards, people stand and they talk, and I think relationships get made, and people start working on the issues that they've just heard about, and connections get made. And from that, you can see maybe a path forward to these great ideas that we've just heard about from the speaker actually starting to get carried forward by the citizens who've been informed through the Civicon process.
At the city of Pensacola, on the government side, we're proactively looking for ways to facilitate the dialogue, the communication with the community. So I think one thing that we see through the Civicon series is this idea to get out into the public, those proposals, and then people they're able to shape it. It reflects their values and the things that are important.
One of the other really exciting things that Civicon has done, and I'll borrow from the words of Quint Studer here, it's raised our civic IQ. And so we have all these issues and these projects and things moving forward in our community. And through Civicon now, our education level on these issues is so much higher than it would have been before Civicon. And so I think we're able to jump the conversation forward to a higher level than if we were just kind of starting from scratch, because we're all a much better informed community than we would have been just a few years ago.
Why is this such a quaint town? Why is this a desirable place to be? Well, as you sit through the Civicon series, you're able to speak intelligibly about, I can identify what about this town is appealing.
I really see how Civicon has inspired tremendous level of activity and engagement in the community, where people are showing up en masse at these meetings, and they're making really well thought out and well-educated comments and things that they've learned about through Civicon. There's been this huge boom in cities again, and cities being a cool place to be. So Civicon has really been an amazing opportunity in helping us understand this transition that's going on and how to make that transition happen in a positive and economically sound and socially sound manner.
Really, it takes a holistic approach to every level of the community, not just the streets, not just the way we structure our urban core downtown or access to waterfront, which is a big part of it, but how we educate a child from the day he's born. How do we deal with individuals struggling with substance abuse, healthcare? It's a full range of topics. And Civicon helps us connect all those pieces together, this history, this street grid, this equity and this private sector, and bundle it all together to be sure that we maximize the potential that we do have.
So if we go to the next slide, want to talk a little bit about how we select our speaker topics. We really, sometimes it just comes out from the community or something going on in the world that's just obvious. But some things that we do in our community that other communities are starting to mimic now, and there are a number of communities that have started their own Civicon speaker series. For example, in Mobile, Alabama, they do something called Coastal Conversations, and have worked closely with us there to create their own program. And they've looked at a number of other things that we're doing, including the annual Quality of Life Survey. and that's written, it's a national survey done in many communities around the country to measure quality of life. Mason-Dixon, a polling firm out of DC, does this, and it's given us since 2008 a barometer of what people are thinking and how they feel about our community and the issues that they think are important. So that's a clear pointer for us on picking topics. And then we also do a Metro dashboard that's on the Studer Community Institute website. It's 16 metrics that range from education to subsidized meals at schools, to kindergarten readiness, to economic indicators. That's another area, whether those are going up or down, getting better or getting worse, that again kind of point us to topics that might be useful to the community. And then finally, at every event, we survey. We ask people, how was the event? How was the speaker? And what topics would they like to have in the future? So that's really the sources for our events.
And I think the next slide will help us. And I know, Bob, we're going to be mindful of your audience's time, but we also kind of had a shifting in where the community was leading. As I mentioned, that first year was kind of all about smart planning and smart growth. And we still do have topics and speakers on that, but we shifted a little bit into the area of education. Our community was experiencing a big shift when we had on the ballot the decision to move from an elected to an appointed school superintendent. So Civicon helped put together a forum to talk about what that might look like, again, in partnership with the News Journal and educating the community. And then that shifted in even more into the next slide that talked about the health of the community. We responded with, I mean, again, we just don't have all the time to go through all of the speakers that we've had, but we do have some good info that we can share with your audience. But we've had topics on diversity and equity. We've had topics on health inequality, bias in the workplace, and we're really kind of now focused on affordable housing. So all of these topics, again, came through to us from the Quality of Life Survey, the dashboards, and community input.
Okay, next slide. So the other things that when they formalized from that first year experiment to an actual organization, the organization that oversees Civicon is actually the Center for Civic Engagement. It's a nonprofit also, and it has those 4 board members we showed you earlier. And besides the speaker series, we're also offer civic engagement courses, which are free and open to anyone. Those kind of were put on hold during the pandemic. We didn't get a very good turnout when we did them virtual, but they're coming back in October of this year. Sessions like how to be a better speaker, how to write a letter to the editor that's effective, or a letter to your elected official that's effective, how to access public records, things like that. So that's been very popular. We also mentor people who have an idea that they want to put forward and try to get momentum with the community. We'll act as a mentor, not that we necessarily support everything everybody wants to do, but just trying to teach them to be more effective. And then, of course, we really encourage that strong towns approach of doing incremental improvements, not waiting for the big plan and the big check from federal government to make things better in a community. And then I meet with city council people and as many other elected officials as I can on a regular basis, just to talk about citizen involvement and making sure that they understand that that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Next slide, please.
Terry, can I add one
Sure.
thing to that? I wanted to point out the difference a little bit between our broad Civicon sessions that we do, and then the civic engagement, the Center for Civic Engagement, the smaller one. So with our large town halls, for lack of a better word, these are national, world-renowned experts, the leading people from all over the world. Whereas the the engagement courses that Terry are talking about, these are, leaders in our own community. These are people who, I led the open records with the former Escambia County administrator. We've had other people that are doing really good things in our community, and we're able to focus on those at these smaller workshop type sessions.
Right, like how to start a neighborhood community, how to start a neighborhood group, and make that effective, and how to effectively discuss topics at a public hearing and intervene in that. So, and they're volunteers. I mean, it's all volunteer.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody would like to know where the money comes from to do this. There are other communities that are emulating us right now. Lafayette, Louisiana heard Quint speak, and they have their own Civicon type series. They have a number of other initiatives that mirror what Quint and other private citizens and community led here in Pensacola to make it a better place. So a lot of it comes from philanthropy. Before Quint will work with these other cities, talk to them, he makes them promise they'll get the money in the community in the room. He says, you've got to get the money on the sidelines into the community, or you're just spinning your wheels. And what he means by that is people that have wealth in your community that are investing all their money elsewhere or in stocks and bonds. You need to get them in the room and talk to them about how they can make a fair return, investing that money to improve their own community, business investment there. So philanthropy is a big thing, but also getting that money off the sidelines. And then in Pensacola, we have what we call founding members. These are just average people in the community that care about the community, that make a small donation to be a founding member, wear a badge, come to all our sessions, and that helps the funding too. But Quint and Rishi Studer provide about 90% of the funding for our speaker series here. In Lafayette, the Chamber of Commerce is the main driver, I believe, of raising money to support their speaker series. And in Mobile, Alabama, these are just a couple of maybe a dozen communities that are emulating this. They have the city of Mobile, the mayor, and some business people that are funding their effort there. So.
Because of the relationship with the Pensacola News Journal, however, we are limited in the type of funding we can accept, because this is the 50 partnership. As a journalist, we can't accept money for journalism. We can't sell sponsorships in a way that another community can. So ours is philanthropy. Grants is something we're pursuing, but we can't accept like a business sponsorship or anything that would make it appear as if we have an inappropriate relationship between the journalism and the funding.
And I think that's critically important, because one of the things that has been, I think, made our Civicon so successful again is that partnership between the Studer Community Institute and the Pensacola News Journal, and the both bringing their particular expertise, and having the News Journal, as an independent news organization, being able to highlight, to ask questions, to bring in forums. Lisa does most of our Q&A, and that those questions come from the community, and then we get those out. That's just been critically important. It's raised the level of journalism in our community, and it keeps local engagement. And I think, Terry, you have another short clip about that engagement.
Yeah, let's watch that if we can.
The sense I get from Pensacola is it's filled with people who see that you can do things, and individuals and groups can take actions and make things happen. And it's just awfully exciting. You just see the good things that you've done, and there's more to do, and I think you have the right people to do it.
This is awesome organization. We're really trying to bring the whole community together to hear and to share and to open up and be inclusive. I think Civicon is great.
You all here with Civicon and what you're doing in Pensacola and the example you're trying to spread other places are being parts of the next laboratories of democracy. People like you are doing the experimentation. This works for downtowns, this doesn't. This works for environmental protection, this doesn't. This works for schools, this doesn't.
The fact that you even have something like Civicon that's trying to bring people together around great ideas and community development, that alone says a ton about the type of community that Pensacola is and the type of community it wants to be.
Okay, next slide. So, this is our contact information. We'd love to share ideas or conversation with anyone. Also, I'm sending to Bob, he can share out our 2022 Civicon magazine. It's an annual magazine that we do that shows capsules of all our speakers since the inception of the Civicon series. It has articles about some of the speaker events in the past year, and it talks about the upcoming events. And we also can share what events we have scheduled for the end of the year that people might want to watch live stream, Bob.
Yeah. So just for the audience to know, we're going to post the slides from this online on our website, as well as the video from this program. So if you have an interest in reviewing the slides that we did look at, it'll be up there on the site. So in terms of some questions, I think I wanted to explore how you had mentioned that the Quality of Life Annual Survey had been going since 2008. It was involved Mason-Dixon Company for polling purposes and survey purposes. How did that come about? How did that happen in going back to 2008? And it seems like it's a very important contributor to the broader Civicon program.
Yeah, that was Quint and Rishi Studer, philanthropists, business people here in the community. He thought Pensacola could be a better community, but he didn't know how to do that. He had actually met the founder of the Gallup poll, and they had talked about measuring quality of life. So in 2008, they contracted and pay for and still pay for each year doing that survey.
And Terry, I think it really came out of Quint's, background in healthcare and the idea of, measurement is the only way to determine whether you're moving the needle. And the idea was, we talk and say, we're a 400-year-old city, so you have to have some kind of baseline as to what was going on. And there was at that time, a big community initiative with the vote on a bond series to fund a big project downtown to take a 30 acres of waterfront property that had been just industrial and grown up and turn it into a community maritime park, which is where our Wahoo Stadium is today, along with a community park. So it was around those that the Mason-Dixon Quality of Life Survey began, and gathering that data over these multiple years has enabled us to have an understanding of, are we doing things correctly, or do we need to focus in different areas?
Yeah. So I Lisa, did you want to?
Well, I saw Jamie had posted a question, and I was going to jump in and answer that. They had asked about what the most effective form of marketing is. And we've evolved a little bit on this. I mean, obviously with the News Journal as a partner, our platform, we've got 200,000 followers on our Facebook, and we get about 7 million unique viewers a month just on our journalism. So using the News Journal, and we do pre-articles, post-articles, we live stream on our platform because that has the greatest reach. But we realized this year that we really needed a specialist just to deal with the non-journalism realm of that. So we recently hired a communication director who is really using social media, Instagram, particularly LinkedIn. He has just started, and Facebook. He just really has a consistent message every day in front of people. So not just, doing one Facebook post and then we're not going to touch it again for a month until our next speaker. He is constantly sharing past tidbits from speakers, anything that is top of mind in the community today. He finds a way to pull in a past speaker to get that word out there. That's been really helpful.
And all of our speakers are the video of their presentations are on the Pensacola News Journal website and are accessible by going there and looking at it. The other thing is with our new kind of focus, as Lisa was mentioning, on social media, Instagram and Facebook, our founding members get involved too. One of our biggest social media influencers is one of our founding members, and she's a great asset and post and repost and really gets that word out. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, Bob, one thing I don't think we mentioned was the size of our live stream audiences, and it's they started out around 5,000 or 6,000 that first year, but routinely now we have 10 to 13,000 live stream viewers of our sites. Dr. Dana Suskin spoke in June about her new book, Parent Nation, and about early learning for children and the importance of it. And we had 11,600 live streams for that event. We had 15,000 live streams for a woman who came here to talk about tree canopy and tree ordinances, if you could believe that. We had over 13,000 for Quint Studer talking about stress and trauma, the difference between those, because that's a very big thing, especially during that pandemic. And we had over 13,000 from Dr. Cedric Alexander, who is the on-air analyst for MSNBC on law enforcement. He wrote a book, Guardians Not Warriors, talking about police reform and what has to happen in the future. So the audiences are huge.
Well, even our physical presence, Dr. Dana Suskin's presentation was on a Sunday evening, which highlights another kind of core concept of Civicon, is that we hold the Civicon events when the speakers are available. So we've held them on Sunday nights, Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, Thursday nights. I'm not sure we've done a Friday, but it's possible. And that's just kind of what we do. It's we do it when the speakers can do it.
Ingrid, we see your question there about you've got some projects in Gulfport and you'd like some guidance or support. I think Terry could be your first call in terms of a deeper conversation about background. If you had a question specific to the newspaper portion of that or marketing, I'm certainly happy to discuss it. Any one of us would be good, but Terry's probably your best bet at that first person, and then he could direct you to whoever else you would need to talk to.
Yeah, I don't think we underestimate the power that the Pensacola News Journal brings to the Civicon partnership. The audience and the professional, what I call earned media, all the stories about the speakers before they come, the stories about the events, and those being available not only in print but on the website. They reside there forever. In fact, if you want to see some of the past presentations, you can go to PNJ /Civicon at pnj.com/Civicon, and you can find all the past speakers on their website, and you can get pretty educated pretty fast.
Okay. There's a question that someone was struggling to find on the comment, and I got as a text. And the question really is, how do you get city and county management and local elected officials to actually embrace and implement meaningful community engagement procedures? And
we're not above shaming. We began, as Lisa said, the idea was we heard from city staff, for city officials who talked about, well, our budgets just don't allow us to travel to go and hear these great events. And so, we said, okay, we'll bring them here. And we routinely recognize at the beginning of a Civicon event those elected officials who are in the audience. Now, as to be fair, as I said, because some of our speakers, we do it when the speakers are available. It is true that we have held Civicon events at the same time as, say, for instance, a city council meeting is ongoing, because they meet on Tuesdays or they meet on Thursday evenings. So there certainly is that. But it's citizens, right? It's citizens who come to Civicon and then go to city council city council meetings and say, hey, we learned about this at Civicon. You ought to go too. And we think that's important. And that's an ongoing project.
Do you do civic engagement efforts directed at city county staff and elected officials?
Every Civicon event we do is directed to city council and our community, because it involves all of us. I mean, again, anytime you're talking about trying to move a city or your community forward, it takes a partnership between the citizens and their elected officials. So it's always the idea to have everyone engaged, and raising the civic IQ is also raising the IQ of those who are in elected position. And when as you saw with Jared Moore, who ran for city government because of his involvement in Civicon, you're seeing that we're having a mayoral election right now. We just had the News Journal just hosted a forum. We've got 4 fantastic candidates for mayor, and many of their policies are policies that we have learned and heard of through our Civicon speaker series.
One of the reasons for our FCA webinar program is to highlight civic excellence around the state in different communities, and also to highlight, but also look towards replication. So in terms of Florida's communities, what do you think are the 2 or 3 key pieces to both success and replication of a Civicon model in other communities around Florida?
First, you have to have a fire starter. You have to have someone in your community passionate and committed to doing this. Secondly, you just have to get out into traffic. That's another Quint Studer term. Again, I've been so uncomfortable on some of our engagements that, because we just didn't know where they were going to go or how many people were going to show up, but we scheduled them, we announced them, and then we'd go schedule them, and then we would plan for it, and we would get an event. We would get out in traffic with the event and just do it. And then, encourage people to take on their areas of passion and explore that little area. Nothing is too small to be involved in. So as an example, some of our Civicon members have organized tree planting, a very small project, but a project nonetheless. Civicon members have been, and kind of did a gonzo close the streets and create a bike path for a Saturday to create a bikeable area. Neighborhood associations are a big passion in our area, and we have a Civicon member who is passionate about ensuring that every community has an association that represents that community, and that's really the issue.
So you've all expressed the fact that having a philanthropist engaged in trying to work with the community in terms of change, positive change and improvement, for other communities, what do you think is the role of philanthropy in this, from this model here in Pensacola? Would you suggest that other communities, and maybe Terry, you could answer this, with some of the communities that have connected with Civicon and then now are doing their own thing, but do you have any thoughts about philanthropy in terms of both private philanthropy as well as community foundations and other philanthropy that needs? It seems like a key ingredient in the
Yeah, I think it is. Although some of these other communities are doing it without it. Odessa, Texas, you have some oil money out there, and you had one person in particular that's wealthy that was a key driver in organizing their Civicon type series and other efforts to improve that city. And so I think, that person is kind of duplicating the Quint Studer model, and really wants just to leave a mark of making it a better place. In Lafayette, Louisiana, even though you've got oil money there too, it really was the businesses, the employers that drove this project there.
And I think that's one of the key areas, is through the business community and the chamber. I mean, if you can vision a great downtown as a small business or business owners in that area, it's to your advantage to be involved in creating community for your area, because it's advantageous economically. All of our speakers have done that. None of the things that we talk about are actually money losers. They're actually investments which bring a return on an investment. Having narrowing a street creates more people. Having a sound and a smart parking program creates more traffic, not less, more pedestrian access. So all of these things we've proven to have a return on investment. So smart businesses, should be involved, and it should be the business community that leads it. I think it's great with government getting involved. I think it's great to have governments having strategic plans and focused on it, but it really has to be your business community. As
I
Terry
would,
said,
I would add one thing to that, Will, though. I think it's important that if it's not a philanthropist, because the good thing about a philanthropist is it's genuine. There's no hidden agenda. There's no outcome that you're wanting out of this other than your community engaged. If it's your business community or your chamber, whoever it might be, I think it's really important to, from the beginning, set your own ground rules so that it keeps you on the straight and narrow. I mean, we ran into some early issues where we jumped ahead, we jumped the gun a little bit, and we committed to doing something that maybe it could have been perceived to be, trying to get a specific outcome. And that's never, to Will's point earlier, sometimes we don't know what they're going to say. We know that their expertise is on gentrification. We know that, but we don't know if he's going to say, it might not be a message that a business person might want to hear, or a community member might want to hear. So if it's your business community, and I do think they certainly have the most to gain, and that's smart, I would just have those ground rules set up early on, established, so that you can hold yourself accountable, so you don't ever accidentally, go down a path that calls your bias into question, because then your community doesn't believe you. If you're doing this just so that you can get a hospital built in this part of town, that they're not going to trust your experts.
Absolutely. And I think that, Bob, I think you just saw an example of how our board operates with our Jiminy Cricket. And that goes back to the partnership that we have with the News Journal. And because the News Journal works and keeps that, because the only thing, or the main thing that we have as Civicon, is we have the community's trust that we're not actually an advocate for your hospital or your hotel or your pet project. In fact, Terry is constantly saying to people who say, I've got an idea, I've got I want to advance my deal. We're not doing that. We're not actually putting these projects in place, getting them approved, we're simply raising the issue and letting people have their input into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really wonderful example of that Civicon plays as civic journalism, because really a key and central character is the newspaper in the context of communication. But that also comes, and I think you're suggesting that you have to build the trust with the community, and that's really a delicate and balancing act and issue. So I appreciate the kind of one key to success is really clarify early on your ground rules that you're going to be operating to. So we're about to wrap up here, and I wanted to thank all the panelists, Terry, Lisa, Will. Thank you very much for helping to profile and expose and showcase this really wonderful effort. And good luck in the future. I think you've got a history going back 5 years, and the next 5 years hopefully will produce a lot of very interesting content and very pointed community conversations that Pensacola will really benefit by. So I'm going to just go to a last couple of slides here to say, just in case you have missed past FCA First Friday webinars, you can view those. They're 60 minutes in length. We've had things on seniors and civic advance. We've had the Village Square in Tallahassee as an example. And we've had several programs going back to February. So go look at that, and in case you have missed. And the next slide, just basically the website and information, and the next slide. So this is going to be our upcoming Fridays. You'll notice that it's third Thursdays. We struggled with First Fridays, as many First Fridays are right at holidays, Labor Day, Memorial Day, etc. And so we're moving to a third Thursday, same concept, and we're going to be working with the Florida Philanthropic Network. One of our board members, Ashley Dietz, is the executive director or CEO of that network of foundations. And they're going to focus in that program on the census and the counting, and also why it's important both to review what happened in 2020, but also to begin to engage in a conversation about how 2030 can be done better. So next slide. Thank you to everyone who participated on the panel, and especially thank you for the panelists. Really was a great example of civic excellence project in action. So with that, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.